Hey beautiful people, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, of course, welcome. My name is Bree, and I mostly do natural hair content, but your girl has really been into the bookish content this year too. So, you know, I'm going to be giving y'all a lot more. Many of you guys have already been here and have been asking for more bookish content. And I have also generated more people from the bookish community. So hello, my name is Bree. Today I'm going to be giving you my top 10 books of 2022. I have a little bit of everything. If you guys have been following me, then you know that in 2021, really going from the pandemic and then leading on, I have really been dipping back into reading heavily. I used to be that kid that read all the time, like wherever I went, I had a book. And then college happened. And I kind of stopped reading because I was sick of always having to read what other people made me read. So having the extra time to read and then being able to now implement that back into my life, basically when I'm not working, I'm reading. And I have read 120 books in the year of 2022. And I had to pick my favorite 10. And shockingly, it wasn't even hard. I thought this would be difficult to pick them, and I picked them in like less than 60 seconds. I already knew. So if you are interested in checking out my 2022 top 10 reads, then just keep on watching. Now, this is just going to be my favorites. I'm not going to have any of my least favorites in here. But if you guys want a video, I mean, there's really only like 3 books I can think of off the top of my head that were just god-awful. But let me know. I also am going to have all of my makeup details and my scent of the day details down below in the description box for you guys to check out if you are curious. As well as my wash and go, because she looks pretty. Now let's get into it. First one, Honey and Spice by Bolu Babalola. Listen, I'm not a college romance girly. I don't like college romances. I think a lot of times college romances are incredibly unrealistic and they try to be witty and funny where nothing is witty and funny. But this one was black love, black young love. It was culture. It was food. It was just everything I wanted. The main characters, Kiki and Malachi, were just like it for me. Like they were just in game for me. There was fake dating. They kind of had this little bit of enemies to lovers thing going on. And I just absolutely loved it. I ate that shit up. There was just something so poignant about the stories of both Malachi and Kiki, and watching them both come out of their shells and really find family within each other, but also watching Kiki find family outside of her own little bubble. I ate both of them up. It was just everything. If I had a man like Malachi when I was in college, I promise you there would be a ring on my finger. Period. Malachi supremacy all day. Probably one of my favorite book boyfriends of the year too. Absolutely love Honey and Spice. If you have not read it, if you love romance, if you like that college aspect feel, but even if it's not something you usually like, I think it's worth giving a try. There is a lot of pop culture in there too, but it's not cringy. Like it fits, it works. If I had to really like put it into words, I would say Honey and Spice is like what you would get if Love Jones and Dear White People had a baby. It has so many of those elements, and it just did what it needed to do. So Honey and Spice by Bolu Babalola, 100% that girl. Now, if you are someone in the black bookish community, then you already know. Legendborn and Bloodmarked by Tracy Deonn. I don't have Legendborn down up here. It's actually downstairs. I just had my mom finish reading it, and she absolutely loved it. So Legendborn did not come out this year. I think it came out the year prior. But I read it in 2022 and just in time for Bloodmarked to come out. And the Legendborn cycle in general is probably one of my favorite fantasy series of all time right now. And your girl is a fantasy lover at heart. I have been slowly inching my toes into different types of fantasy. This right here, YA fantasy, it is based on the folklore around King Arthur and the Round Table. But I feel like this is probably one of the most digestible fantasies that you can get out there. The world building isn't too much because it does take place in North Carolina. You have your main character, Bree, who is going into the early college program at UNC Chapel Hill. And her first night, she encounters kind of some strange magical occurrences. She's been dealing with grief after losing her mother and also a lot of guilt for her being at the school in the first place. And when she sees these things, she starts to feel that there are connections between the loss of her mother and these magical occurrences that are going on campus. And when she is introduced to Nick, she is then thrust into this entire secret society that is the Legendborn. This is kind of like a love triangle situation between the main characters of Bree, Nick, and Cell, but more than anything, this really is just an evolution of Bree. And I love the way Tracy went into this. And I know a lot of people have criticized this book because they feel like Bree is too childish. And I really need people to unpack the fact that you feel like it's a problem for a 16-year-old child to be a child. And Tracy has been very upfront in saying that she did not want Bree to be a stereotypical strong character because Black women always have to be strong. And especially young Black women, we're supposed to be strong and we're supposed to act more mature than we really are. And we're supposed to pretend that the things that are happening around us aren't happening. And I love that Tracy took all of that and said that's not who Bree is going to be. She is going to be a regular kid that is thrust into a ridiculous world, you know? And she's going to be what she should be for being thrust into that world. And she's going to be vulnerable and she's going to struggle. And she's not going to handle things the way that an adult should handle them. And I love that. There are just so many important discussions in this book. And especially revolving around being a Black woman surrounded by the white male gaze and trying to get a seat at the table and realizing that you can't get a seat at the table. You have to make your own fucking table. And I know a lot of people focus on the romance subplot between Bree and Cell and Bree and Nick. But I'm not Team Nick. I'm not Team Cell. I'm Team Bree. Like, at the end of the day, the only thing I care about is her evolution and the decisions that she makes. And I will tell you, when I got to Bloodmarked, at the end, I was just sitting there with my mouth hanging open, like, wait, that's it? Like, that's all we're... Tracy! But I absolutely live for this book. If you love fantasy, even if you don't love fantasy, if you're someone who typically struggles with fantasy, I feel like this is one of the easier fantasy books for anyone to get into. Because like I said, the world building is not crazy. And I feel like it's just very digestible and very relatable. My mom is not a fantasy gal and she ate this shit up. So I highly suggest it, especially if, you know, you're looking for books for your young Black teenager. I feel like this is one that you need to put in their hands. It's so good. I love it. Legendborn by Tracy Deonn is that ish. Now, your girl, who is usually just a straight up fantasy girl, has gotten into her romance era. I've gotten into my romance era. I've gotten into my smut era. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to go back. And Restore Me by J.L. Seegars has been everything. I will be honest, right now I'm currently listening to the audiobook for Restore Me. She recently released the audiobook and I had to get it. I had to use my Audible credit on that one because I had to hear Dominic say "Arms up, Angel." I had to hear it. This is probably one of my favorite romances of all time, and there is only one book that kicks this down a peg, but it's the tiniest peg, okay? Restore Me is a second chance romance. You have your main character, Sloane. She is trying to get back into dating and intimacy after the loss of her husband 4 years ago. And you find out that his best friend Dominic has actually been in love with Sloane since they were in college, and she doesn't remember how they initially met, and she has no clue that she met Dominic first. And this entire book is how they come back together and rekindle their love, even though Sloane doesn't really know that she's rekindling anything. This really does go through that process of grief and finding love again. It's just so beautiful. The smut in here is immaculate. Dominic Alexander is yummy. I love Sloane and Dominic. I am so excited to get into Revive Me, which is the second book in the New Haven series. Revive Me is in 3 parts, and it is about Mallory, who is Sloane's husband's twin sister, and her lover, Chris. And I have heard that it is like devastating and beautiful and all the things. This book made me cry. I know that one is going to make me cry. I will say, I have heard people mention this, and I will say that one thing that people don't talk about a lot that I think can be triggering outside of the, discussions of miscarriage and death is the relationship with Sloane's mom. I feel like can be very triggering for people because her mom is awful. That woman is evil. And I feel like that can be very triggering for people. So do know that. I feel like that's something that a lot of people don't talk about when they talk about this book. But it is just amazing. The romance in this is everything that I needed. And I am a J.L. Seegars stan, okay? If she writes it, I got into the Plated Prisoner series by Raven Kennedy this year. And it has been one of my favorite series of the year. Now, I will say it's not for everybody. I know some people that absolutely 100% hate this series. And to me, as someone who loves it, I feel like the people who hate it are very valid in that. This is not your typical fantasy Greco-Roman retelling, right? This is a story of grief. It is a story of immense trauma and how that main character comes out of it. I have Gleam here because this is my favorite in the series, but I love the whole thing. The main character is Aaron, and she is a gilded woman. She is fully gold, and she is known as King Midas's pet, basically. This is a King Midas retelling. If you don't know about King Midas, he's supposed to touch stuff and it turns into gold, right? So she is his golden favored, and she has been living for the last 10 years in a cage. In her youth, she ran into Midas. He saves her from a really horrible ordeal, and they make a deal. And when he becomes king, she becomes his favored. And she's basically like his own personal prostitute, basically. There is a lot of sex work discussed in this book, so if you're not with that, be aware. But this encapsulates Aaron's journey from really breaking down these rose-colored glasses that she has around Midas and realizing that Midas is not her savior. Midas is not her hero. She is the hero. And there is so much that you learn about who Aaron really is, and watching her break those bonds of trauma, watching her get away from her captor, watching her find love is just everything. And that journey, I feel like, has been one of the most amazingly written journeys that I have ever seen in fiction. It's not an easy read. The first book is sad. It's sad. There is a lot of trauma. I feel like, honestly, the first and the second books probably could have been put together, but that's okay. There's one more book coming out, I think in April, and it's called Gold. But I am so excited to see where Aaron ends up. Gleam is probably my favorite because this is the book where she really breaks down all of those barriers and she really comes to terms with who Midas is, and she starts to welcome love into her life. And so that's why this one is my favorite, but I love the entire series as a whole. Definitely make sure you're checking your content and trigger warnings with this because there is a lot. There is some essay in this. And there's still a lot of trauma in this book, but the things that come out of it are just beautiful. So these books had me in tears, y'all. Straight up big, fat, juicy tears. So the Plated Prisoner series from Raven Kennedy has just been everything. This is one that people don't talk about, and I don't really know why. I don't really hear this author talked about a lot, and I don't hear this series in general talked about a lot. I've read the entire series, and I love the entire series, but the rest of the books will never stick with me the way this one does. And this is Feather by Olivia Wildenstein. Y'all, it's rare that I'm put into a reading slump, but this book put me in a reading slump because when I got to the end, I was just devastated. My feelings were hurt. I just didn't know how to feel. I'm like, how can I read another book knowing how this ended? This is described as Romeo and Juliet with angels, but this is so much more than that. You have your main character, Lay, who is an angel, and she is working on completing her wings. And so in this world, angels don't just have their wings. They have to work for them, and they get them by going out and helping souls. And so they pick people to go out and help, and when they transform them, they gain so many feathers depending on what that person's, score is, like how bad this person is. And when the opportunity to become the consort to an archangel comes around, she embarks on this journey to reform a triple. So he's triple digit, and if she can get all those feathers, she can ascend, and then she can marry this guy. Well, she ends up meeting this triple, Jared, who is the leader of the French mafia, and he's a bad guy. He's been indoctrinated into a bad home, but you find out that the reasons why this man is in fact a triple are not for the reasons that people think that he is. And she discovers that he's basically been wronged. And so his soul has been deemed lost for a mistake. And she ties her life to him. She falls for him. And it's a sad and tragic love story because there's no way that these two can ever be together. I knew how this book was going to end, and I was still devastated at the end. This was actually supposed to be a standalone, and I understand why she chose not to go that route, because I don't think I could have lived reading how this book ended and not having some type of hope for Jared and Lay. So if you read this, you can absolutely read this as a standalone, but I promise your heart's going to be happier if you read the other two. I love Jared. He was not the bad guy that he thought he was. I loved Lay because she was just so imperfect. Everyone thought she was perfect, but she was genuinely so imperfect. I loved her friend Celeste, and you will eventually learn to love the Archangel Asher as well. Highly suggest this. It's so good. If you love a little romance in your fantasy, I highly suggest this. But get your tissues. Make sure you have your tissues because you're gonna need them. That's a taboo romance. I will say this author right here, I think, is my favorite for like taboo, like smutty romances. I feel like she just does them right. Like you can tell she does her research and she tries really hard to make really endearing characters. And the first book in her Salacious Players Club series, Praise, y'all, listen. If Emerson Grant existed, I would snatch him immediately. So the Salacious Players Club is focused on 4 different owners of a sex club. They're all in a really bad spot, and the leader of their friend group, Emerson, comes up with this idea of opening a sex club and creating an app where you can kind of match your kinks and taboos in a way that is consensual and safe for both parties. And they end up opening this business, and that is how you meet Emerson. The main female character is Charlie. She is the ex-girlfriend of Emerson's son, Bo. They have a really awful breakup. Bo was an ass. You get to meet Bo later. But they have a really awful breakup. She goes to Emerson's home to get part of her security deposit because it was sent to him. And he mistakes her for the sub that his friend was supposed to send him to interview. And that's how they meet. And he is instantly enthralled with Charlie. So this is like age gap and also dating my ex-boyfriend's dad. And I loved every single second of it. This is probably really the only age gap that I really loved. I find a lot of age gaps to be really, really weird and gross. Because I don't know why authors insist on making the girls 18. Like, why? Ew. I struggle with those. Like, I don't really do age gap. This is the one that I was like, okay, I'm with it. I don't mind if you're like, if you in your 20s, you got all your faculties, you know. But if I see a teen in there, I'm automatically like, you could have bumped her up a few years, please. But this was so good. And the relationship between Charlie and Emerson is just so genuine. And she's struggling with her confidence and really finding herself and feeling like she is worthy of love and kindness. And he hops in and he's just like, listen, you the baddest and you about to be mine. And I love me some Emerson Grant. He's just so imperfect and he has such a big heart and he just wants someone to give all of that to. And I am just obsessed with this book. This is one that I will probably reread several times because it is good. And the smut is immaculate. So there's that too. But if you are looking to get into a taboo series, I feel like this is a very safe series to go into. I enjoyed all of the books in this series and there are going to be 2 more coming out. About, I think, Ronan and, God, what is the girl's name? I can't remember her name, but she goes by Madam Kink in the book. And I was hoping that we would get a book about her, and I'm really excited that we are. So, really excited to get the rest of the Salacious Players Club series. But if you're going into taboo romance and you just don't know where to start and you kind of feel weird about a lot of the selections, I feel like Sarah Cate is a really great place to start. Up, The Blood Trials by N.E. Davenport. Oh my God, y'all. That book, when I talk about hardcore, high stakes, sci-fi fantasy, y'all, that book had me on the edge of my seat every single page. It is not fluffy. It is not kind. Don't get attached to anybody. She kills too many people for that. It is everything. You have your main character, Akenna. She is really struggling at the point where you meet her in the book. She is dealing with the loss of her grandfather, and she is also struggling because she is from a bloodline that is not well accepted in the community that she is in. With the loss of her grandfather comes a lot of the loss of protection for who she is as a Black woman in this society. She decides to go into this training for basically like a special forces unit that is called the Blood Trials. And she decides to go through these trials as a means to discover who killed her grandfather because she finds out that it was an inside job. And these trials are bloody, they're gory, they're hardcore. And you watch her struggling through these trials and tests while also trying to hide her blood gift that also makes her a huge social pariah within society that nobody knows about. This does have like the teeny tiniest romance subplot, which it's not even like romance, it's more like sexual tension. You get a little bit of spice, just a little bit. But this is more surrounding like the political end games and these bloody tests and tribulations that she has to go through. She experiences so much loss in this book, and I am so excited to find out what happens in the next book. This is a duology, so It's The Blood Trials and then The Blood Gift, which is coming out this year. I can't wait to see what happens with Ikenna. I want to see where things go with her and Reed, and how their newly formed gang pans out. I just want all of them to win. Like, that's where I'm at right now. I want all of them to win, and I cannot wait to see how she bucks the system in the next book. But if you have not read The Blood Trials, you need to. It is what I would consider like a new adult fantasy. It is gory, it is bloody. Make sure you check your content warnings because she's not for everybody. And then the next one, which I also don't have, I'm going to be buying both of these, especially this one because apparently the current hardback version is going to be going out of print soon. But this is the Final Strife, and y'all, I've heard so much about this book. And when I tell you that this book is so all-encompassing with representation, it is a sci-fi fantasy, and it chronicles the life of 3 different women, and all of their lives intertwined. The main character, Sela, who is basically struggling through a lot of loss, grief, and guilt. And when you meet her, she is currently an addict. And so if you struggle with addiction and stories, this one is difficult. It's hardcore in there. She is basically in this lower class society, and she is from a group of kids who were stolen from the upper echelons of their current society as babies and indoctrinated into the secret society where they were trained to go against the very people that they came from. And so in a lot of ways, she's a trained assassin. And after losing all of her family from that group, she's basically in hiding and mourning, and she is going through some serious addiction. A friend that she had thought was dead comes back from the grave and tells her that, hey, like, we need to do this. Like, we said we were going to do these trials. We said we were going to do these games and take our place, like, take our rightful place. And, like, we need to do this. And so he kind of gives her the push to move on to going into this and trying. But in the process of her trying, she finds out who her mother was supposed to be and discovers that woman's daughter, the one who was replaced with her. And she ends up developing a relationship that starts off as her being kidnapped by this girl, and then ends up being the one helping her complete these trials to take up her mother's seat. There's a lot going on in this book. It's hard to really explain a lot of it without telling y'all a lot of really important details and giving away too many things. But all 3 of the women that this book really touches on are immaculate. There is just so much representation. There is trans representation, non-binary representation. There is a lot of dealing with addiction and grief as well. It was so good. With all fantasy, it does, sometimes fantasy can have its problems and plot holes, but it was so well done. The next book in the series, The Battle Drum, comes out this year, and I cannot wait. And the cover is absolutely stunning. If there's a black girl on it, I'm gonna buy it, okay? So I cannot wait to find out where this goes, because I am rooting for Sela. Like, I want her to win. She has come such a long way. I'm also rooting for her friends too, even the friends that kind of fucked up. I'm rooting for them too. So The Final Strife, if you have not checked it out, it is another one that deals with a lot of difficult topics. So check your content warnings, but it is definitely worth the read. This one for me definitely is one that I kind of latched onto emotionally. I picked this book up and started reading right after we got my mom's diagnosis, and it was just a balm to all of the stress and the anger and the fear that I was feeling at the time, and that is Dating Dr. Dill by Nisha Sharma. This is basically like a retelling of The Taming of the Shrew. And that's kind of Nisha's thing with this series, is kind of like taking Shakespeare and turning it on its head, and that Desi culture. I love this book so much. I absolutely love both of the main characters. You meet your main female character, Karina. She is going into her 30s. She has really put down this idea of love in order to focus on her career. And with her getting closer to 30, she is getting pushed by her family and her aunties and the whole damn world to get a man. And so she's going into the dating scene and she's really struggling because she really wants a love match and she is picky. She wants what she wants and she doesn't want to settle. And on a night out with her friends, she ends up meeting this guy. She really, really likes him and they almost hook up and she ends up having a really embarrassing experience with him. The following day, she goes on to a show with her sister. It's this guy who calls himself Dr. Dill, and he is very much anti-love. He does not believe in love. He believes that it's just, you know, chemical processes and, you know, pheromones and all that stuff. But he doesn't really believe in this idea of soulmates or love matches. And when she gets to the set, she realizes that Dr. Dill is in fact the guy that left her high and dry the night before. She goes off, completely embarrasses herself and him on set. And it leaves them both in a pretty difficult situation where they end up having to set up this fake dating relationship in order for both of them to get what they want in the end. I absolutely love the banter between Karina and Prem. The spice between Karina and Prem was like, oh, that's what we're gonna do here. I wasn't expecting this book to be spicy the way that it was, but it's spicy. I loved watching their relationship blossom. And it was kind of like they were the only two people that didn't realize that what they had was real, which I feel like happens a lot when it comes to the fake dating trope. I love the aunties in this book. They were some meddlesome heifers, but you know what? They were looking out for your girl, Karina. They really were. Her sister and her dad, I couldn't stand. Like, her immediate family, I couldn't stand. The aunties, I loved. But I absolutely loved Prem because he was not afraid to put people in their place for Karina. Just everything about this, the banter, the descriptions of food. I loved their friend groups. I enjoyed as well. And so the next book is going to be about Bunty and Benjamin, who you meet in this story. And I'm really excited. I think it's called Tastes Like Sugar. And I'm not sure when it's coming out, but I know it's coming. And I'm really, really, really excited because I can't wait to see more of them. I really enjoyed this. Like I said, I definitely have some personal emotional ties to this book, which makes it like one of my tops. But I could not put it in here. Like, this was the first book I put on the list when I started making this. So Dating Dr. Dill by Nisha Sharma. So good. If you love some good rom-com energy, this is the one. This one is totally different from pretty much all the books that I have here. This is Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. And I will be honest, guys, I almost DNF'd this. So that tells you how good this book really was for me to almost DNF it and then to end up putting it on my favorites. I had started off this book and the voice that it's written in kind of threw me off. And I think at the time it was just something that I couldn't appreciate. It's difficult to describe because of how the story is set up. But you're introduced to the death of Eleanor Bennett, and she is the matriarch of this family and the center of the story. And you meet her kids, Benny and Byron, who are coming together after being estranged for many years. And their mother, Eleanor, leaves them a recording explaining her life story. And you learn that she is this little girl from the Caribbean who loved to swim and was forced into a dangerous marriage by her father. And you learn about her entire trip around living in this world, being abandoned by her mother, being abandoned by her father, and being put in this precarious situation that forced her to have to run and reinvent her life. And so Eleanor Bennett wasn't always Eleanor Bennett. And she leaves these tapes to explain to her children how her life unfolded, who she became, and also that they have a sister. This was deep. it hit me like gut deep. The difficulties with grief, the difficulties that some of these characters have with coming out and relating to their families and feeling like the black sheep of the family, and how daughters are often put on the back burner in black families. This was just so much, and I don't really know how else to explain it, except that you just need to read it. If you're looking for something that really is going to kind of give you those feelings of, I don't know, like almost nostalgia and connection, this kind of broke down something for me that I didn't really know that I needed in a book. And it was just so good. I highly suggest, if you have not read this, to pick it up. The culture and the life lessons, it was beautiful. For a debut novel, Charmaine Wilkerson did that. This was my first book from this author. And I knew from the first page that this book was going to hit different from me. And that is Before I Let Go from Kennedy Ryan. Y'all, this book hit me in all the feels. This thing tore me apart, broke me down, made me cry, and put me back together. It was everything. This is a second chance romance, and this is what second chance romance is all about, okay? The main characters in this story are Yasmin and Josiah. Yasmin and Josiah have been estranged and divorced for 2 years, and they struggled heavily in their marriage after a miscarriage that led to the downfall of their relationship. And there were other things going on too. There were other deaths within the family. This book is one of the most beautiful tellings of how a man and a woman, estranged, broken, beaten down, come back together, put themselves back together, and learn to love each other again. I think the thing that really stuck out for me throughout this book was the food. Yasmin and Josiah are both restaurant owners, and their restaurant is it's big in this book. It came from Josiah's aunt's recipes. It was something that they had built together. And one thing that I loved throughout this book was that in Yasmin really coming full circle and discovering herself and gaining more confidence and trying to reconnect with her family, she breaks out their aunt's old recipes, and you see how her making these dishes that come from such an important place and such an important person slowly kind of rebuild their relationships. And they're a way for her to say things that she isn't necessarily able to say with words. Y'all, this was just beautiful. I was rooting so hard for Yasmin and Josiah, even to the point where the new woman that Josiah was dating, she never did anything wrong, but I could not stand that woman. I was like, listen, that is Yasmin's man, okay? Like, you go away. It was so good. And it just hit me right here in the heart. This was definitely the book for me in 2022. Out of all the books that I read, this is the one that has stuck with me, haunted my dreams. I think about this on a regular. It was so good. I am going to be going into a deep dive of Kennedy Ryan. I have started purchasing all the books in her Hoops trilogy, and I can't wait to read more from her. This was fabulous. If you love romance, if you love second chance romance, if you love black romance, you need to read this. The sun told me it's time to pack it up, so that's what I'm going to do. Those are my top 10 reads for 2022. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys are ready for me to be sharing a little bit more bookish content on the channel. I have really dedicated a lot of my free time to getting my reading up. Like, that's really what I've wanted to do, and I think part of it is because I've kind of been a little depressed. But we ain't gonna talk about that, okay? But I can't wait to share more of my favorite reads and sharing more of my favorite authors with you guys, because I'm definitely discovering some authors that I feel like I really resonate with, and I can't wait to share more of those people in 2023. So you guys let me know, what was your favorite book of 2022, the one that stuck with you the most. Leave it down in the comments below. Like I said, all pertinent information will be in the description box below for you guys to check out. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Maybe I've been going nowhere lately.